Don't judge me. It's research. Hello there, ladies and gents, and welcome back to One Man Band. My name's Azopardi, and each week I take a popular musical artist and write a song inspired by their style. And if you couldn't tell who that was this week by my awful facial hair and the JD, it's the legendary Motorhead, the petrol-fueled rock and roll legend. I thought, as we're now into the penultimate episode of the first season of One Man Band, it's about time we covered a classic group. On Monday I covered their track Ace of Spades, which you can watch up here, and as ever I suggest going and watching that first, because I will be making reference to what I learned putting that cover together throughout this video. I've made videos about a lot of modern bands so far, so I thought it's time to go back and look at some rock and roll royalty. Motorhead were, for the majority of their career, a power trio, although there were times when they had two guitarists. They were formed and fronted by the indomitable Lemmy, who is the only ever-present member of Motorhead and encapsulates everything they are. The roles of drummer and guitarist were sort of revolving doors throughout the career of Motorhead. Lemmy was the talismanic front man of Motorhead, and he formed the band and paved the way for their success with his rougher than sandpaper voice, rock and roll lifestyle, and very unique way of playing the bass, but we'll get onto that in a moment. Motorhead's style was fueled by speed. Literally. And while I'm not prepared to go quite that far to emulate their sound, I'm going to be writing a song inspired by the lineup that produced Ace of Spades, the album and the song, and in fact Motorhead's first 5 studio albums. That is, of course, Lemmy Kilmister on bass and vocals, Fast Eddie Clarke on guitars, and Filthy Animal Taylor on drums. So I'm going to be tailoring my song specifically to that era of Motorhead. Let's jump in. Well, we may as well start with the main man himself, Mr. Lemmy Kilmister. Weekly disclaimer. Do you know what's great? I don't have to give you a disclaimer about having a Strat, well, a fake Strat anyway, because Fast Eddie actually did use a Strat, so I don't have to apologise for that this week. But I do have to apologise for not having a Rickenbacker. Don't have £1,500 spare. Sorry. Right, so let's start with the main man himself, the great Lemmy Kilmister. His style of playing bass rendered him slightly too rock and roll for his previous group, Hawkwind, for whom he originally auditioned as a guitarist. Some might say that even in picking up the bass guitar, Lemmy never stopped being the guitarist. The way that he plays his bass using power chords, and the way that he strums through the thick, heavy strings, it's like he's playing guitar, and it formed his sound for years and years to come. When the guitar is playing chord parts, the bass is often doing the same thing, especially in the power chord sections. You can hear that here in Ace of Spades. And when Fast Eddie Clarke launches into a solo, the bass fills out the space, often by playing chords. So I've used this approach loads in my song. In fact, the bass is playing power chords almost as much as it's just playing single notes like a regular bass line would. For example, here's the bass boosted version of my verse so you can hear what it's doing. It's playing chords for nearly the entire verse. And like with Ace of Spades, the bass is again playing chords underneath the guitar solo to fill out the space. So here's that part of my song. In Ace of Spades, while the guitar is playing the main riff of the song, Lemmy lays back into a more conservative role. Well, conservative for him anyway, where he's just playing the root note. The guitar should be tuned half a step down, but I'm just playing it half a step down. He plays the root note and then drops drops down 2 frets, then comes back to the root note. And this is a really common way that Lemmy uses to back up the guitar when it's playing a lead part. You can also hear him doing it in their track Overkill. And many more tracks like Stone Dead Forever. This technique, while just being generally really heavy because you're strumming away at the thicker bass strings, really adds to the pace of their tracks. If he played just one note the whole way through, because he is essentially just riffing on the root note, if he just played that one note, the bass would more easily get lost in the mix because it could just sound like one long note. It's not quite as interesting for him to do that. So by dropping down and adding the... even if the guitar doesn't move at all, he adds the pace back into the track. You can feel that it's moving because of those little notes he puts in. Again, just adding more speed to their sound. As I mentioned before, Lemmy really does play his bass like a guitar. And he has solos. For example, in their song Stay Clean, which is potentially my favourite Motorhead song and one of my favourite songs ever, he has a moment in there where he starts to rise above the guitar because he's playing high up the neck, and because of the tone that he's using in that song, it's so harsh and cutting that you can hear it above the guitars. Take a listen. So I've done a little bit of that in my song. It's not as long as the one in Stay Clean, but it is my little reference to that track because I love the way that the bass tone works in poking its head above the guitar for a brief moment. Sorry, I've just seen my reflection in like the back of the camera and I'm not sure I'm gonna keep this facial hairstyle. Cold chin. Very cold chin. Anyway, Lemmy's style is instantly recognisable and honestly it's impossible to imitate without being Lemmy. But it was so much fun paying homage to the legend that he is. His style is so unique, and we'll get on to the way he sings and writes his lyrics later. I'm not done with him yet. I love him too much. He's amazing. Right, let's move over to the guitar. Now, while Lemmy is the main event in Motorhead, I don't think anyone can really argue with that, him being the ever-present member, the guitar playing shouldn't go unnoticed, and Fast Eddie Clarke, the guitar player on the album Ace of Spades, is unbelievable in the way that he works in tandem with Lemmy, and his guitar riffs are as recognisable as Lemmy's bass playing. When you think of Ace of Spades, you think of the riff first. That's Fast Eddie Clarke. Eddie Clarke played on Motorhead's first 5 studio albums and also their legendary live album No Sleep Till Hammersmith, producing some of Motorhead's most recognisable riffs. His riffs were very rhythmic and very bluesy, and they worked brilliantly in tandem, like I said, with Lemmy's bass playing. Because they're both playing power chords a lot of the time, they just fit together beautifully to create this wall of sound. And sometimes I think because of how legendary Lemmy became, Fast Eddie Clarke sometimes I think is slightly underrated. When it came to writing the riff for my song, I wanted to incorporate that same bluesy sound that Eddie Clarke had throughout his time with Motorhead, and this is what I came up with. I liked how in the structure of Ace of Spades, whenever the line, "the Ace of Spades," comes in, Eddie Clarke reverts back to the main riff of the song. So you have a vocal hook and a guitar hook meshing together, and they keep resetting back to it and reinforcing it as they go. And I'm going to do the same thing with my track. When it gets to the main line of the song, we're going to hit them with the guitar riff again. In many of the chorus sections of Motorhead songs, Lemmy and Eddie will often sit back into just strumming fast, often playing power chords rather than doing anything fancy. They let Lemmy's vocals just be the main event for those choruses, and the guitar and bass are often playing chords as fast as they can with heavy strumming. In fact, Fast Eddie said in an interview that the name Fast Eddie came from his ability to play one note very quickly in a solo, so it kind of suits his style. You can hear this in their track Stone Dead Forever, where in the verses Fast Eddie is playing stabs, it's a bit more rhythmic, then it opens up into the choruses, he's playing these chords super fast, and Lemmy's doing the same thing, just strumming away and letting the vocals take over.
Better leave your number, and we'll call you. You know your problems ain't exactly new. The right side of the road. Your choice has turned to go.
The guitar solos of Fast Eddie are brilliantly put together as well, and I wanted to incorporate some of the things that he does in my own solo. Firstly, there's these ascending thirds that he puts in the solo of Ace of Spades in this bit. And I did the same thing in order to inject some tension into my guitar solo here. Another feature of Eddie Clarke's solos are the hammer-ons and pull-offs that he uses. Very bluesy, very rock and roll, classic rock and roll style technique. You can hear these again in the Ace of Spades solo. And in many other solos, like the one in Fire Fire. So I threw some of these into my solo as well. So yeah, Fast Eddie is fast. He's the perfect guitarist to work with Lemmy, and it's no surprise to me that they produced some of Motorhead's best music when they were working together. So let's move over to the third member of the band, and for that we're going to have to head over to the drum zone. Take it away, my boy.
Ah, Phil Taylor, let's go! Welcome back to the drum zone. I don't have any speed to hand, so I've downed 17 energy drinks and a litre of coffee, and it just makes me want to play fast. Sorry, I don't know what came over me there. Phil Taylor's drumming is fast and relentless. I honestly don't have a clue how that man played songs at that pace, intensity, speed for hours every night. Well, I do know, actually, but it's potentially not the right sort of lifestyle to promote on YouTube. Just in playing through Ace of Spades repeatedly, I really did find it hard to keep up with Phil Taylor's playing. That's how he earned the name Filthy Animal. He was a filthy animal. And that pace, based in the punk style of drumming, I mean, it is Motorhead. He commonly uses this sort of punk pattern. Wailing on the open hi-hats, sizzling them as he goes. It's blisteringly quick, and he just sort of adjusts that in a lot of songs, like in Ace of Spades. Phil Taylor commonly uses this sort of punk pattern. But I mean, much quicker most of the time. My chorus drum beat kicks the song into double time and essentially just uses that basic punk pattern, just going like this. That's essentially the only beat where I could really keep up with the pace I wanted to go at in my song. Here is that beat in the context of my song.
I know your head stops everywhere. I see you here and I'm starting to scare. I know you're here, I know you're there.
His fills are often immensely quick as well. Take a listen to the one that leads into the guitar solo of Ace of Spades.
Maybe I'm not gonna live forever.
Oh, yeah. Even now with the extreme metal drumming that we've grown used to, Phil Taylor's no slouch. And he was also a common double kick pedal user, but 2 bass drums because, you know, heavy music, got to have the big drum kit. And even the song Overkill was written purely around a double kick drum beat, which is this one. So while I didn't use it throughout my entire song, I did throw in a little double kick section as a reference to that intro to Overkill. Truly the endurance that this man had to unleash these beats every single night for hours on end under the heat of stage lights is completely astounding to me, and he will be sorely missed, as will the entire classic Motorhead lineup. So thanks for the beats, Phil. Bye!
Well, that was quite something. Wow. Before we get to the song, let's touch quickly on Lemmy's vocals. Now, I will be the first to say that any hope of replicating Lemmy's vocal style will always be in vain. Decades of cigarettes and Jack Daniels do something to your voice that I potentially haven't been able to do to mine, so I just set up with singing as intensely as I could. I also think Lemmy was underrated as a lyricist. While there were many songs about sex, drugs and rock and roll and his lifestyle, there were also tracks covering concepts like war, for example the track 1916, which is arguably one of the most tender moments in Motorhead's entire discography. He could also be genuinely hilarious with his lyrics. His dry humour and sarcasm and euphemisms weaved in with the general rock and roll tones are genuinely funny at times. Lemmy was a funny bloke, and I've tried to weave those in with my lyrics. A bit tongue-in-cheek and a bit rock and roll. You can see my lyrics in the description below. And with that, we have our Motorhead song. We've had a very intense couple of weeks playing some tricky prog music, so it was an absolute pleasure to just write some straightforward, fun Motorhead music, and they absolutely deserve the legendary status and praise that they get. If you enjoy this track, then please leave a like on this video, comment to let me know which band you want me to do next, and subscribe so you can see when I do. Long live Motorhead. This is my little homage to them. It's called Knife Eater. Enjoy.